Yeah, let's wait for the people to come in because I see there are some people who will get with us, accompany me in my journey, which is great because that way I'm not that scared anymore because, yes, we're talking about scary things. Final countdown, 1 minute. Oh, I'm so happy to see so many people accompanying me. Like, we will beat horror movies in numbers. Alrighty, I see the last people taking a seat, no rush. But I guess we're now on time, it's 12 p.m. The different midnight, let's call it like that. So let's get ready to start, I think. So, welcome everyone, I'm so happy to have you with me here on my endeavor. And I know, as already said, like a little minute before, it's a little late for Halloween references and it's pretty bright in noon. But let's call it contrast noon to get us into a scary mood. Because we are the team to survive horror movies, or at least horror-like situation in web security. So buckle up. Unfortunately, I don't have popcorn, but at least let's get ready to dive into security risk through horror movies. And of course, I will talk about horror movie points, which means there's a slight spoiler alert because obviously I cannot use horror film allegories without going into one or two content details. However, I will do my best to not go into too much spoiler territory, but just in case you know. And as it's horror movies, those are not the friendliest movies in the world, right? We might get into explicit content points, so there's a slight content warning as well, because horror movies being scary sometimes dark, and sometimes not too friendly. Okay, so this is a small frame from the movie Scary Movie 3, where a person is saying like, I'll be back, because they're curious to check out the noise, to see where the killer's at. I don't know. So how many of you guys saw such a line, such a moment inside of a movie? Oh, I feel great because there are so many people alongside me. And how many of you felt a little annoyed or like, okay, it's not that clever that they say I'll be back and check something alone? Ah, thank you. I was almost like, okay, I couldn't be that arrogant to say I think it's a bad idea to just say I'll be back and disappear. Same with this frame from Scooby-Doo. I took Scooby-Doo because it kind of became a meme. However, this is a line you can find in many horror movies as well, because people seem to be convinced it's a wonderful idea to just venture alone and say, let's split up, because teamwork is not a good idea in horror movies, not at all. And if people do stuff like that, I'm always like, okay, this is a bad idea. Everyone sees it's a bad idea. Why do people do that? Well, but as I already slightly hinted before, it doesn't need to be a horror movie, because obviously horror movie content is sometimes a little bit far-fetched. But scary situations, severe situations, are we sure we're better than those people handling those situations in movies, in TV? I'm not sure if we are really better than those people, because obviously sitting on a couch, having our popcorn at hands, or being at a conference, we're not that much in danger, right? So, are we really more clever than those people in horror movies? Well, I'm not so sure, because if I take a look on the news, those things, they seem pretty dramatic, like heartbleed, cell shock, boom. But those are not horror movie titles. Those are real-world security issues happening. So even if you think there are people who are doing a good job, obviously they're human, they make mistakes, such as we do mistakes. And those are basically pretty big security issues, like Heartbleed, which was a vulnerability in the popular OpenSSL. And I guess most of us people did have to do something with OpenSSL in one point in time, right? So there's a big range of problems which could happen if we are not paying attention, if we are not listening to warnings, if we think we are better than all those people. And obviously, horror movies are far-fetched. They are fiction. But I do think, even if they are not completely the same pictures, it's wonderful allegories, wonderful metaphors to learn about security. So let's use them to learn, and then come together and craft a small playbook, a small survival playbook, like the How to Survive a Horror Movie rules in Scream, right? Never go out alone, be a team, take care of your batteries, stuff like that. Or the stuff in Zombieland, which they're obviously using some rules like physically education might be a good idea. No worries, I know it's almost lunchtime. I will not say to you like we do anything physical right now, but we will take a look at movies. And I want to start with one thing which you have in loads of horror movies. It's the professor. In this frame, I try to draw the professor of the movie Sinister. Sinister, there's a demon which is pretty evil. But it doesn't matter which movie we look at, because oftentimes there's a professor, there's a team, there's a nerd, there's a friend. A nice companion helping us to get through the horror movie problem situation. Like by sharing lores, sharing solutions. In the real world, in web security, we have those people as well. And seeing you here together with me at stage 2, it's already a wonderful indication that we have many people helping us when it comes to tackling security issues, because you came here, you learn about security, you talk about security with other people. So we are a team. But it's even more than that, because in the internet, in the world, there are other people, and especially one team helping us to navigate security horror movie issues. And I want to introduce one pretty famous team, which is basically our professor, our team, giving us warnings, best practices, and hinting us at places to take a look at first, if we want to build a secure application, if we want to counter security issues. The team is called OWASP, which is a shorthand for Open Worldwide Application Security Project. And their goal is pretty obvious, actually. They try to raise security in web development. And they do it in a range of things, like sharing best practices, giving us opportunity to do trainings, like the OWASP Juice Shop, which is an application insecure on purpose to try to hack it. But also, on a certain cadence, they publish a ranking of security issues, basically the top 10 ranking of the most important security risks. And as far as I know, 2021 was the last complete ranking, so we have results. I do know that they have a 2025 one soon as well, but they didn't finish it yet, so I will need to use the 2021 numbers. And with that being said, let's dive into the first OWASP rank, which I think is wonderful to learn about using a horror movie. So, this is the oldest movie I have inside of my list right now. It's called The Invisible Man. It's made in, I guess, 1933, so it's fairly old. But for the people who wants to see a little newer movie, there's one from 2020 as well, which is slightly different, but still okay when it comes to being a remake and having a slightly different plot, but still okay. In both cases, it's about a scientist called Griffin who comes out to be invisible because there was a failed experiment, because scientists in movies often have failed experiments doing special things, let's say it like that. So yes, there's a person who can be invisible. And at first he's going into hiding because obviously invisibility is not the normal state of a body. However, invisibility comes with some perks. That means he's using it. He's using it for pranks in the first place, but obviously, as it's a horror movie, he might get into crimes or even murders in the course of the movie. So, being invisible and abusing this invisibility, it's a wonderful metaphor for the most important point in OWASP ranking, rank 1, broken access control. And access control itself refers to the fact that users cannot act outside of their given permissions. So a user should ideally only see what they are supposed to see, do what they're supposed to do, not being able to, for example, alter or delete data that are not giving the permission to do so. And as a result, broken access control, the failure in it, leads to all the things where a user can act outside of those ranges. May it be unauthorized information disclosure, like a data leak, or modification, or even destruction, coerce, and token manipulation. So yeah, everything a user shouldn't be able to do, but is still able to do. And actually, it's ranked 1 in OWASP for a reason, because there will be the most occurrences in the contributed dataset. If we take a look at the parallels, the obvious one is the invisibility, obviously, because this is the main plot point of the movie. So, invisibility stands for unauthorized access, that an attacker can go inside of your application and just roam around unseen, can do everything, see everything, do everything, delete anything. And this is obviously an abuse of power, which is the other parallel. So both Griffin and an attacker can use their might, their powers, to do harm. Basically, a privilege escalation. Another thing which is especially important to note, invisibility means we cannot see a person, which means we have a full sense of security. We will not notice that an attacker is inside of our application doing stuff or seeing stuff they are not able to see. So we feel safe, but our guards and our logs cannot stop what they can see, right? So yeah, it will give us a false sense of security. And last but not least, connected to the false sense of security is the traceless crime. Griffin, as an invisible man, or our attacker, will not leave any traces inside of our login because we cannot see it, right? Yes, so invisibility or broken access control is a really important aspect, and I don't think it will be less than rank 1 in the next dataset, but this is just an assumption or prediction from my side. How can we counter the invisible man? Well, first and foremost, we should think about denying access by default for any user where we don't have a role assigned to. So unless it's a public resource which the public can already interact with or see with, we should always deny and then basically assigning roles on the get-go. A rate limiter might be a good idea as well to minimize harm. So a person, an attacker, or a Griffin cannot just brute force their way in without you being noticed. So it will minimize the harm being caused by someone who tries to get access into your system. If you use tokens, especially for sessions, you shouldn't forget to invalidate them, if it's possible. So if it's possible, keep them short-lived, refresh the tokens. So if an attacker will get their hands on the access tokens or ID tokens, make sure it's outdated pretty soon so they cannot do anything with it. And if you cannot be on a short lifetime, basically, think about going for protocols like OAuth. And last but not least, you don't need to implement a complete ACA layer for yourself. Think about using tools for it. So there are lots of access control mechanisms at your disposal to minimize coarse resource sharing and other access control issues. I want to quickly show you one because it's an open source library I really like. It's called OpenFGA. It's a CNCF project, so the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is pretty trusted, at least in my head, so I feel pretty comfortable to use this library. And it's basically inspired by Google Zanzibar, so it's pretty cool. It's basically role-based access control, but you can do it attribute-based as well if you prefer it. No worries if you cannot scan the QR code like right away. I will share those slides later after my talk as well, so no worries at all. All right, next movie. This movie is called Hellraiser, and I guess most people might have met this guy at some point, like in YouTube or in media. This friend, quote unquote, is called Pinhead and is pretty well known. But I wouldn't consider it a friend because it does evil things. Basically, the plot of Hellraiser revolves around a puzzle box called Lemon Configuration. And it's pretty tricky to solve, but people can solve it, can crack it. And if they do, it opens a gateway to a hell-like realm, different dimensions, and will call the Cenobites to this life. They will haunt the people who are able to solve this lemon configuration and hunt them for experiments, which is not that much comfy, right? And yes, I guess a woman tries to save her friend who did exactly that, solve the puzzle box. I guess the person was called Frank or something. And tries to save her partner from those Cenobites. It's not an ideal allegory, but I still think it's a good idea to take a look at it for the second rank of the Ovis ranking, which is cryptographic failures. And this rank was previously known as sensitive data exposure, so people were having data leaks because of a weak or even not encrypting their data at all. So they went to cryptographic failures because the data exposure is basically a symptom. So it's now cryptographic failures, and as the name says, it relates to all the cryptography issues and the lack thereof. The movie parallels in between Hellraiser and cryptographic failures are like this in my head. The puzzle box is the encryption system, and if you solve it or crack it, for the people who owns this lemon configuration, the encryption system, it's a bad thing. So the Cenobites, which are coming back to haunt the person solving the puzzle, are basically the consequences of cryptographic failure, so of decrypted data. The different dimensions which are opened by the lemon configuration are security context and Frank's resurrection, so the attempt of his girlfriend to bring him back to the real world is a failed data recovery. Because obviously if Cenobites do experiments, you might not get the same person back as you thought or you hoped for. So how can we counter Pinhead? How can we survive cryptographic failures? First, obvious giveaway, please encrypt all sensitive data, especially at rest, so people cannot crack it that easy. You could think about classifying your data inside of your application so you know which data is sensitive and where you need to take even more care of protecting it and encrypting it. Don't store data unnecessarily. So all the things you don't need anymore, may it be code, may it be any data in your session you don't act upon anymore. Try to get rid of it so people who can read your session and stuff cannot act upon it. Please try to stay away from legacy protocols such as FTP or SMTP because they're pretty easy to be cracked open. So this is a point to take in mind. Instead, try to go for secure and up-to-date protocols such as TLS. And last but not least, especially me, I worked in e-commerce before, needed to get used to that one. But if you don't need the data, be really mindful on caching. Caching, of course, gives a wonderful user experience, but of course, people can listen to it. People can peek into the things you cache. So be mindful on the things you want to put inside of your cache. Okay, now I'm a little excited because the next movie is basically the very reason why this talk exists, because I do think it's a wonderful allegory and metaphor. It's this one, Alien. And I was already happy to see one of the arcade machines over there being basically an Alien arcade machine. So if you want to get into the movie, there's an arcade machine, even though it's not the first movie, but still it's there. So back to it. If you didn't see Alien before, it's a movie from, I guess, 1979 by Ridley Scott. And it deals with a spaceship crew, which is normally on exploration, however, will be called to a derelict spaceship because of an emergency signal. And when they come to the spaceship, it's empty. But of course, they're curious, and maybe they take a look at too many things, like eggs, which they shouldn't take a look at. So they will get back with one more being inside of the crew, let's put it like that. And this additional being will lead to the space crew being haunted by an extraterrestrial creature called xenomorph. And the xenomorph wreaks havoc. And the xenomorph, or basically the person or the being which makes sure the xenomorph will be born, is called Facehugger. It's one of the main characters. And it will be found in this Devworld spaceship. And it will take sure of egg hatching. And it seems cute maybe, I just want to hug people, but I do think it's not the best idea to be hugged by this friend. Because, well, unless you're up for a special souvenir, you shouldn't do it. Don't be the crew. Because I do think this way of getting to know the facehugger to the xenomorph is a wonderful metaphor for injection. Me being a front-end developer, injection is the main concern I need to take care of when it comes to building my applications. So this was really important for me to put into my talk, and I'm happy to have the perfect allegory on it. Okay, the facehugger. The facehugger is basically a being who turns human or life forms into hosts because they inject an egg. And this is a perfect opportunity to explain like an initial attack vector in injection, because basically injection is about the attacker injecting a malicious code to your application, and this malicious code being executed as if it was our application. So basically being injected and then being executed. And there are a couple of ways, and the facehugger is maybe a wonderful idea to get this vector into your heads. Well, it's wonderful for input validation bypass and initial system penetration, and leads to an implementation of an egg inside of a human. And yeah, this is basically a perfect code injection of the malicious data. When the egg hatches, so the chest burster, I won't go into detail, but it will basically start to get the being born, is a wonderful allegory for code execution, because the xenomorph is being born, the birth is being executed, the malicious code is being executed. And of course, if we got a xenomorph inside of our spaceship, or malicious code inside of application, it will wreak havoc. It will lead to many different being system access being complete for the attacker, being resource consumption, anything. So don't have a xenomorph inside of your application, killing all the important bits of information and security layers you had in place. Yes, so how can we survive a xenomorph? How can we prevent injection? Well, let's take a look. Please think about going for safe APIs or trusted sources. Double check what package you download and only use trusted ones. Use safe APIs, avoiding any third-party interpreters in between, so everything you do on your own is yours. You can think about going for a parameterized interface, so nobody can just completely inject like a SQL statement doing things, SQL injection. And especially when it comes to SQL, think about using an ORM, which will help you a lot staying secure as well. Alongside your measures in the front end, consider doing some server-side input validation as a safety net. So you have a validation, taking a look at the input, at the code, if it's unaltered, trusted, and doing the things you want it to do. Of course, doing it server-side is not a complete measure, because sometimes you need special characters and such, but consider like whitelist and the front end page here as well. We'll get to that later. When it comes to SQL and for preventing SQL injection, go for limit or other SQL controls to avoid mass data exposure. So maybe they get one data set, but not your complete database if they try to go by SQL. And last but not least, especially in front end, escaping. Go for escaping. Try to get rid of special characters if you can. And yes, be careful with SQL structures. Yes, I shouldn't forget, because SQL structures such as table names, column names cannot be escaped. So be careful if you need those. This is a really simplified code example on how to escape characters. And I wanted to build a small class for a quarantine system, basically, to match the alien allegory. And yeah, at first we go for a scanner, so this validate input stuff, which should detect hostile patterns. We get to that later, how to do it maybe. And we will take the input basically, And if we detect hostile patterns or chest burster, maybe, we will throw a security error. Any exception, I will not proceed with the input. Afterwards, we go for sanitizing, like a decontamination of sorts. So if there's a sus thing, so not a chest burster in specific, but something which seems a little suspicious, we will clean it up. It's a process of cleaning, basically. So you can use tools like DOM Purifier or Sanitize HTML. You can do it on your own. But many frameworks, I know for sure that Vue is doing that, and I'm pretty sure that Angular and React does have something in place as well. But correct me if I'm wrong. Frameworks do have some escaping features when it comes to input fields, for example, to help you with that. I love to go for regex myself if I want to have a little more customized, which is not like framework-based, which is often native browser APIs, pretty standardized. And you can basically go completely creative on that one. Here I just listed some examples which I like to use, like the ones targeting commands, doing the exec, filtering out script tags, which is pretty easy. It's a typical cross-site scripting point you could go for. And like all stuff, SQL, Arta, drop, whatever. And netcat shell are pretty interesting to get filtered out as well. Well, so I guess we got 5 minutes left, so let's be a little quicker, because there's one point where I am not a role model as well, and I guess everyone of us was a little unperfect when it comes to this as well, because this is the reason why I want to give it in. Last movie, The Blob. And I don't know how to describe The Blob pretty accurately in English without using the word blob, because it's basically it. It's a movie on, I guess, the year 1958, so it's pretty old as well, and it's about an alien, which is a blob, crashed on Earth. And it's like a mass of something enveloping living beings and devouring them. And in this way, it will grow and grow and grow, being more aggressive, needing more food, more red, and being even easier to get rid of, because you cannot fight it by like the typical weapons and stuff. So this is a wonderful allegory for technical debt, which is growing, 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 as long as you don't fix it. And one of the biggest technical debts leading to security issues is this one, vulnerable and outdated dependency. And I guess every one of us might have ignored Dependabot at some point. I'm guilty, so we shouldn't do that. Because what grows and becomes more terrifying in web dev? Exactly that. And it's really helpful to fix vulnerable and outdated dependencies, because obviously you need to update. This might crash your application. And it takes some time, it's tedious, nobody wants to do it, but the longer we wait, the longer it will get us into trouble. And it's ranked 6 in OWASP ranking, so it's happening even more often than I thought it would. But I guess every one of us already forgot about Dependables. The movie parallels, to be real quick, it's basically the growth of the blob. It's a wonderful depiction of dependency sprawl. So as long as you wait, it will get more difficult and more difficult to fix it. The consumption of victim is the vulnerability spread. So if you got one outdated dependency, this dependency has even more dependencies, might being outdated, might lack security issues which are being fixed. So you get even more vectors for attacks. And yes, unstoppable growth, obviously, the longer you wait, the more dependencies will get outdated. So how do we counter the blob of outdated dependencies and vulnerable dependencies? Well, we should remove all unused dependencies, unnecessary features, component files, documentation, everything we don't need. Similar to before, we should remove. So we don't need to maintain it or think about it anymore. To know what's outdated and what not, we should try to get an inventory of all versions we use. And no worries, I don't tell you to take a look at your package.json files all over again. There are tools to help you, like the OWASP dependency check, retire.js, stuff like that. It might be interesting to take a look at the common vulnerability and exposure databases, so where all the security issues are stored. But just go for tools, because that might get tedious at some point. Again, obtain your packages from official sources and secure links, and do your research, because only because it's listed on NPM, it doesn't mean it's a secure application. So there has been really sus packages before, do your research and be careful. And then try to find out if the packages or dependencies you use are still being maintained. Because if it's not maintained, obviously there will be no security fixes introduced. Okay, well, last but not least, every one of us don't ignore Dependabot. Update, 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 even if it's a little tedious. This way you get security fixes inside of your application. Okay, just a final note on OWASP. As said, they are working on a new listing, on a new ranking, so stay tuned. I do think at least some of those top 3 topics will not disappear, but it might be interesting to take a look at it. Last time I checked, I guess they were in between data collection and normalization, so it might take a little more time, but they will be a ranking soon. And before I forget, some more general tips I want to share with you before I let you go to the dev world. Either if you are in a horror movie or in security, stay as a team. Don't split up, as we already learned before. And as said, I'm so happy to see you all here at a conference, because you already did the first step to being educated of security. If not of me, then from other people. Talk to other people, contribute, learn, and help one another. Take care of your batteries. Don't be the person with an empty torch or smartphone. And the same goes for your tools. Nurture your tools, maintain your tools, take a look at them, update them. You don't want to be the person without any batteries. Double check if the killer or attacker is defeated. So if you fix a security leak, test it. I was sometimes a little annoyed by movie characters who would just turn their back on a seemingly defeated killer and then being up for a jump scare. Don't be that person. And last but not least, take your professors, your teams, or OWASP advice seriously. Don't ignore warnings, because they're there for a reason. All right, this is it for now. Thank you so much for being with me. We survived this horror movie tropes. I'm really, really happy. So if you got any questions, feel free to just talk to me somewhere here around. I got swag with me, so if you want to take a small conversation with me, you might get some swag. And apart from that, we survived. Thank you so much, and see you later.